with a little help from my friends. I am Joseph. This is Input English. For those of you joining us for the first time, this channel, Input English, provides content for comprehensible input. This is designed as a resource for you to learn English using comprehensible input. This is arguably the best way to learn the English language. I started out with the phrase, with a little help from my friends. That is really the theme of what we're talking about today. Humans, people, are very social creatures. And we have friends, and we interact with other people, and language learning is an interactive process. Today, I got a little help from my friend. I got a perspective, and I'd like to pass that on for you because it should help you quite a lot as you design your program for learning English. This channel, Input English, provides content that is at the intermediate level. I have no beginner content on this channel, but there are other channels that provide beginner content. I have chosen to be in the niche of intermediate content for a very specific reason. With the English language, I am aware that people all over the world have studied English in school. Most of them have studied English by traditional methods, but they have a non-zero level. They're not beginners. They can understand some words, they have some vocabulary, and according to my research on the topic, there are a lot of intermediate English language learners around the world. But the problem that they have in common is that they have trouble understanding native content. It's too fast. And they have trouble speaking because it's hard to find the words and get the words out. So if that sounds familiar to you, this channel is made for your needs. Comprehensible Input is the best way to bring your level of English listening comprehension up and to improve your ability to speak. Now, in order to get tangible results from using comprehensible input, it takes a long time. If you get 10 hours of input, you wouldn't notice any difference in your English language level, and you might be tempted to say, oh, this doesn't work. I put 10 hours into it, and I can't tell a difference. But 10 hours is not where you measure it. Hundreds of hours is where you measure it. At 100 hours of additional input, you might be able to notice a difference. At 200 hours, you probably can tell a difference. With 300 hours of additional input, you will definitely be able to tell the difference. Input in English could be listening input, and listening input could be a YouTube video. It could be any kind of video. It could be an audio. It could be an audio book, or it could be a podcast. So there are lots of ways to get input, but speaking is not input, that's output, and writing or typing is not input, that's output. My working assumption, at least for my language learning efforts, is that I need about 90% input and about 10% output practice. Now, one of the things that is super important for this channel is that we take people as we find them. And that is, I'm not going to project roadblocks for you that will interfere with your program. If you've done a lot of speaking in the past in English and you want to improve your English pronunciation, for instance, this channel will help you do that. Often in English, people have tried to speak the language long before they got to comprehensible input. In its purest form, comprehensible input is ideally done with a silent period. That is, when you start with comprehensible input, you listen and you don't talk, because you're trying to bring the sounds of the language into your brain. You're trying to import the phonemes, and you need those phonemes to pronounce the words. The best pronunciations you will get in language learning come with people listening predominantly for their first 1,000 or maybe even 1,500 hours before they speak. But I make no demands of you that you observe a silent period. I realize that people have their own circumstances, and you may need to use the English language in the day-to-day. It may be part of your life. So if you have to speak English, speak it. When I started learning Spanish, I had the luxury that I didn't need to use it. And so I listened to 1,500 hours of input before I tried to speak. I wanted very good pronunciation. What I'm getting at is you may or may not have an opportunity to focus primarily on listening during the early part of your use of comprehensible input so that you can have better pronunciation. The phrase I started out with is "with a little help from my friends." You may recognize that as a song title. That was the title of a song. It was written by Lennon and McCartney. It was published and performed on an album in 1967. That was on the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album that they published in '67. The lead was sung by Ringo Starr. This was 58 years ago. The reason I mention that song is it is literally how I came to this topic, because this morning I did a recording session with a friend of mine who is also a content creator on YouTube. That is James with English Sponge. Now, if you don't know English Sponge, you need to. You need to find James. You can find him in two places. I will put the link to his website in the description. You can also find English Sponge as a channel on YouTube. We recorded a session this morning, and James is going to publish that on his channel, English Sponge. It'll also be on his website. In our discussion, we talked about strategies for the use of comprehensible input. And one of the points that James stressed in our discussion is that we don't want people to start out early in their language learning journey with reading. He pointed out that you're better off to listen a lot before you read a lot. I absolutely agree with that. But he gave a little bit of help to me to remind me that this is a priority if it's available to you. So now you have to look at your own situation. You need to take inventory. Where do you stand? If you're already an experienced English speaker and you're already doing output and you've already read books, then there is no need to stop that behavior. No, we're not trying to control you and force you to do something that doesn't fit in your life. But if, on the other hand, someone is watching this channel and they've not been speaking in the day-to-day, and they've not been reading a lot of books, then our recommendation would be to really focus on listening first. I look at listening as a two-tiered process. First, we listen as we watch videos because they're much easier to understand. And then as our listening comprehension improves, then we can start using audio track only resources, specifically audiobooks and podcasts. Now, podcasts come in a couple of flavors. That is, podcasts can be language learning podcasts, or they can be native content podcasts. The latter is going to be harder for you to understand, of course. A point that James and I agreed on as we discussed strategies for comprehensible input is that native content is not very good for the intermediate learner. If you try to understand television series and movies at the intermediate level, you may frustrate yourself. The trouble with movies, in addition to being frustrating, is they're not very concentrated with language. Movies have chase scenes, knowing looks, music, explosions, sword fights. They have all sorts of action, and all the action in a movie is designed to entertain the watcher. But the content in a movie is not purpose-built for the language learner. You got to understand, movies are for entertainment. And if you use movies to learn English, you're repurposing entertainment content for a purpose that wasn't built into that content. Net effect, movies are not very effective. James pointed out correctly that native content can be frustrating. The vibe that I am trying to create on the Input English channel is akin to you are talking to and listening to a friend. I do not hold out to the YouTube community as a guru or a super expert. I make comprehensible input content basically out of gratitude. I learned Spanish with comprehensible input, and I am grateful every day for the hard work of the content creators who made that possible. So the vibe here is not me telling you what you have to do. It's a friend of yours telling you what is available, what you might do, and what has worked for me. I always encourage people to look at where they are. Look at what you're doing and look at what your priorities are. In recent videos, I have showcased books you can read, sources of reading material, that is Project Gutenberg and Owl Eyes. Yesterday's video, I showcased LibriVox as a way of getting listening content, audiobooks read by volunteers on the LibriVox website. I'm giving you a lot of resources, and I'm encouraging you to take an inventory of where you are and try to figure out what works best for you. Now, what works best for you isn't going to be constant. You may find that videos work best for you at a stage, and then later, the advantages of audio only become important. That is, audio only allows you to listen while you're driving, listen while you're traveling, listening while you're taking a walk. About half of my comprehensible input in Spanish I got from podcasts and audiobooks, listening only content. And about half of my input has been videos similar to this. So as you design your program, I'm telling you, your program is going to change because you're going to change. The content isn't going to change. Once the video is made or the audiobook has been recorded, it doesn't change. But you, the listener, you, the language learner, are going to change. This has been one of the most exciting things I noticed when I was studying Spanish. So today I got a little help from my friend, James, at English Sponge. I encourage you to take a look at his channel. His channel is, of course, different than Input English, but different in a good way. He has a lot of beginner content. So if you find that content on my channel might be a little bit difficult, I would suggest you take a look at English Sponge. You may find that spending some time with some of his easier videos is time well spent. And then, of course, you are welcome to return here. I think learning language is a social activity, and we have simply been able to use technology like video cameras and sound systems to project this social activity across the globe. Both James and I try to make videos which are warm, friendly, and welcoming. And I think that's the way content for Comprehensible Input should be. I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.